So David emailed in a screenshot to kind of help illustrate, what he's looking for, along with the instructions here. Right. So obviously this is running on a Renko chart, the unit Renko in particular. So it has 4 moving averages. So we have 2 EMAs and 2 SMAs, and then also the super trend M11 to determine the trend direction, right? But also the moving averages are determining trend direction as well, right? So so we have a 20 and a 35 EMA, with some separation there. So we can see the blue and the orange line there, right, are the 2 EMAs, right? So we want them sloping in the same direction, all right, with some separation. And then we have a really fast moving SMAs there. So we can see the white lines there, on top of the Renko bars. So we want those fast SMAs to be below, both of the EMAs there. And then the super trend M11, is just also a trend direction filter being used as well, right? So once all the moving averages in the super trend are all, sloping, well, actually the SMAs don't necessarily have to be sloping in the correct direction. They just need to be above or below the EMAs, right? And so what we're looking for is the wick to be touching that EMA 20, right? We want the wick touching the EMA 20 there. And yeah, so once all the moving averages are in their correct location, then look for the wicks, and that will generate a signal. So basically it's going to be the reversal bars. Well, actually it doesn't say reversal bars. It's just a wick here. So I guess most of the time it's going to be a reversal bar. All right, so that's it. We can see I do have a chart up, and I was hoping that would be a short signal, but I don't think it lines up. Actually, it does. All right, that does work out just by a fraction of a tick. So good, there we go. All right, so we do have a signal there that we can work with. Let's see if I can find another one. Yeah, here would be another one. There we go, so I can find it later. All right, there we go. So I got two areas marked on my chart where I know a signal should appear, and that will help me build out the system there. Let's see, we'll stay focused right there. So, all right, let's get BloodHound open. Start going to work. All right, so first thing we want to do is put a file name in here. So I'm going to hit the Save As button. All right, next thing, so I have a file name in there. So next thing I'm going to switch over to using the Logic tab here and start a new Logic template. And let's see, what should I call this? All right, there you go, something like that. So I'll try and keep the name short. Well, so let's start with the easy stuff here. So, identifying the trend direction of the super trend, right, is really simple and easy to do. So I can, for that, I'm going to grab a threshold solver. So there's several ways to do that, to determine the trend direction of the super trend. But I'm going to use the threshold solver. All right. Let's see. So for the input, I'm going to replace the SMA with the super trend. And this super trend came from Lizard Indicators. You can also find it on Futures.io. At least older versions you'll be able to find on Futures.io. So the latest version is going to come from Lizard Indicators website. So let's see, let's scroll down here. And remember, we're using the M11. right? So there's two super trends. There's a U11 and there's an M11. So make sure that you have the M11 installed as well, right, before opening this BloodHound template. So, although if you don't have the M11 open, when you open this BloodHound template, you can replace the M11 with the U11, right? So BloodHound will open up a specialized window so that you can replace missing indicators. So if you're missing the M11, you can replace it with the U11 when BloodHound tries to open it. So, all right, some of the other things I need to do here is we're using custom settings here. So 315, 2.5. So yeah, so I think just the base period needs to be changed to 3. The multiplier is 2.5, and the range period stays the same at 15. So, all right. So we have the indicator settings adjusted here, and what I want to use is the trend. So you notice that, right, the super trend comes with a data series, right? It's not a plot, it's a data series. So think of a data series as like a hidden plot. It's like a plot that you can never see, and it's called trend. And the purpose of this is to tell you if the indicator is in a downtrend or an uptrend. So that's what I'm going to use there. I'm going to select that trend direction. And then, let's see here. All right. So, right. So we can see here, super trend is in an uptrend, and then it switches to a downtrend. So, with the outputs, I'm going to set the outputs like this, right? So that data series trend is going to be a positive one when the indicator is in an uptrend, right? So this is something that you will have to ask the programmer of your indicator that you're using. But typically, if you see a data series called trend, it's going to be a positive one when the indicator is in an uptrend, and a negative one when the indicator is in a downtrend, right? So this trend will usually equal +1 or -1, and sometimes 0 if the indicator has a non-trending state, right? A consolidation state. Then this trend would equal 0 typically, but it's all up to the programmer. So you do have to get that information from the programmer sometimes. Right. So knowing that trend equals a +1 for an uptrend, so our long output is going to be greater than A. We want to use the greater than A. And what is A? A equals 0, right? +1 is greater than 0, right? And then for the short output, we're using less than E, right? And again, E is 0. So -1 is less than 0. And so that's what we want. We want to identify the -1 when that trend equals -1. All right, so there we go. So straightforward, using the indicator's own trend. So the alternative to using this threshold solver would, so if your indicator doesn't have that trend data series, you could just, at least for the super trend, you can just compare the bar prices. Is the close of the bar above the indicator plot, or is the closing price below the indicator plot? That would be another way to identify the trend with an indicator like this super trend, right? So in that case, you could use the comparison solver and compare the closing price of the bar to the indicator plot. So that's an alternative way here. But okay, so next let's work on the two EMAs. All right. So I'm going to grab a couple of slope solvers. So this is going to be the EMA 20 slope. So let's change the SMA to the EMA. There go. So there we have it. When the SMA is sloping up, we get a long output, and when the EMA is sloping down, we get a short output. So there's one, and let's see here. I'm gonna take a little shortcut here. I'm gonna go over to the Solvers tab. I'm on the Solvers tab. Copy. I'm gonna use the copy button. You can see I just made a copy of that EMA 20 slope solver, and I can change the name to the EMA 35 and then go into the indicator, open up the indicator, and change the period to 35 there. So now we have the slope of the EMA 35 period right there. I can go back to the logic tab, go to my existing solver nodes, and then existing nodes, and there's that new solver I just made. So I could drop that on the board and then connect that in, and there you go. So that's the orangish kind of line there, or the light red. Okay, so there's the slope. Let's see, now next we need to make sure that the EMA 20 is above the EMA 35 for a long, or of course the 20 is below the 35 for a short. So for that, we're going to use a comparison solver. We're going to compare the EMA 20 to the 35. So let's connect that in there. Let's give this a name here. All right, so the input A, that's going to be the faster moving average. So there's the EMA. And change the period to 20. And then input B will be the slower moving average. So once again, select the EMA, change the period to 35, and there we have it. So as long as the 20 is above the 35, we're going to get a long output. And we can see right here, is where the two moving average cross each other. And so now the 20 is below the 35, and so now we get a short output. All right, so we have a bunch of trend filters already built. So now we can start connecting them together to start seeing some of the trend here. So let's use the AND node. So we're going to grab an AND node and start connecting everything up. There we have it. So let's kind of take a look here. So the long output starts basically when the close of the bar breaks above the super trend downtrend plot. So now basically the uptrend has started, and then of course the fast EMA is above the slower one, and the super trend trend direction has changed. Then if we scroll down here a little bit, what happens here is, let's see, my guess is the EMA 20 must start sloping downward right here. Yeah, that must be what's happening right there. So there's no longer a upward trend anymore because the EMA 20 starts sloping downward. And then we got this up bar, and the EMA starts sloping up again, and so then we get a 1 bar with an upward slope. And then over here, we have to wait for the EMAs to cross each other in the right direction, and then the downtrend output starts. So okay, so that's part of it. Let's see here. All right, so we did rule number 3 first, right? So rule number 3 there is the super trend. We did that one first, so that's the solver on the top. And then rule number 1, we did second. So that's the two EMAs sloping in the same direction. And also we also included, right, the direction or the location of the two EMAs. So we need the 20. Let's see, actually, you know what? This doesn't say anything. Actually, I actually added that. So actually, this comparison solver, I inadvertently added that. I kind of read too much into these directions here. So actually, there's no requirement of them being in this, one above or below the other, just being separated there. So yeah, so we'll actually, I'll just disconnect that and leave it off to the side there, just in case. So let's create that separation requirement there. All right. So let's see here. Yeah. So I can use this same comparison solver, but just make some modifications to it. So I'm going to go over to the solvers tab, and let's take. So here's that EMA 20 and 35 comparison solver. I'm going to make a copy of it. And so let's say those indicators need to be separated by, I don't know, 2 ticks. So, all right, so I'll just put in a 2-tick separation between them. So, right, so we want a 2-tick difference between those EMAs. So in the difference section here, I'm going to put in 2 ticks, like so. All right, so now it's a matter of getting the outputs set correctly there. All right, so let's switch over to the logic tab first and go to my existing nodes and drop that new node on the board, and let's connect that in there. So there's a couple ways that we can make sure that there's at least a 2-tick separation. Let's see here. Right, so if I use the A equals B within 2 ticks, right, I'm identifying when they are within 2 ticks of each other, right, but I want the opposite of that. So then what I can do is invert them. I can invert the output. So I can set the invert to true, right, and there we have it. So now we can see when there's at least a 2-tick separation. And maybe, this is a pretty large Renko bar, so maybe I'll knock this up to 5 ticks. A little bit more. Yeah, I'll just keep it at 5 ticks for now. And adjust the name here. So make sure that you update the name of your solver if you update the settings, just so you don't get confused later on. Right? So now you'll notice, right, that this solver is giving me a long and a short output. And that's because separation doesn't have a trend direction, right? If 2 things are separated, that doesn't tell you the direction of the market, right? It just says, yeah, they're separated. So you want a long and a short output for non-directional type of conditions that you're looking for, right? So, all right, so with that, right, so our AND node, so far, right, the short slope starts back here because both EMAs are sloping down. And now if I connect in that separation, there we can see when they're close together, right, that is that short direction or that short trend bias is removed, right, because the EMAs are too close to each other. So, all right, so there's that separation there. So now let's let's move on to the SMAs. All right, so we have an SMA 3 and 5 period, and we want to make sure that they are below the two EMAs, right? So, so the white lines, the SMAs need to be below the EMAs. All right, so again, that's going to be, that's going to require a bunch of comparison solvers. Yeah, so we'll have to grab several comparison solvers here. So I'll compare the SMA 3 to the EMA 20 first. All right, so the SMA 3, so all we need to do is go in and adjust the period to 3. And for input B, let's plug in the EMA and adjust that to a 20 period. And there we go. And so there's the SMA 3, and when it's above the blue line, right, we're getting a long output. And then over here we can see the SMA 3 is below the EMA for 2 bars, and so we get a short output. Right, and of course over here we can see the SMA is below the EMA, the blue line. So there we go. So now we just need to make up a bunch of these comparison solvers like that. So I'm going to switch over to the solvers tab again, and I can do that quickly over here. So let me hit copy. And so now I compare the SMA 3 to the EMA 35, and then I go into input B and update the EMA. So let's put in 35 there. All right, so there's that one. So now I can make another copy, and this time we're going to switch out the SMA and make it a 5 period, and then compare it to the EMA 20. So there's a 5 period. Right, so there's the SMA 5 compared to the EMA 20, and I now need to make my last comparison here. So that'll be the SMA 5 compared to the EMA 35. So let me change input A. Right, change that over to a 5 period SMA. There we go. So there's my 4 different comparisons. All right, so now I just need to drop all these on the board. Oop, I clicked the wrong solver, so let me go and delete that bar direction solver. There. All right, existing nodes. And there's the SMA 5 to EMA 20. And one more. All right, there we have it. Let's move all these up a little bit. Here. All right, so let's connect that in. And connect all these other nodes in. There. All right, so now let's take a look at the board here. So let's see, let's take a look at these couple of bars here, right, with the short trend. So yeah, so both SMAs are below both EMAs. And then the EMAs get too close to each other, so there's no separation there. So the trend disappears, and then the downtrend starts again. All right, so there's the 2 SMAs below the 2 EMAs, right, for a short setup. Okay, so now we just need to look for that wick touching the EMA 20. So if we go back to the image there, So there's the wicks touching the EMA 20. Well, actually, it doesn't look like that actually touched. So that might be a mistake. And that one might have touched. So, all right. Last step here. Move that up. So, again, we're comparing the high of the bar to the EMA 20. Right? We want to make sure that the high of the bar is above the EMA 20 for a short output. All right? So that's a comparison, right? We're comparing the high of the bar, which is the wick, right, to the EMA 20. So let me grab a comparison solver. Connect that in like so. So let's see here. So we're comparing either the low of the bar or the high of the bar to the EMA 20. All right, so input A, that's going to be price, right? So for a short, right, for a short signal, we're using the high of the bar. So for a long, we're going to be using the opposite price, right? So that would be the low price of the bar. And then input B is going to be the EMA 20. All right, there's 20 period. And so now we need to get the outputs correct. So for a short output, right, this is a short signal, so we want a short output there, right? But we can see that on the signal bar, there's no output. So that tells us that our output settings are incorrect. We want A to be greater than B. So if we open this up, right, we want the high of the bar to be greater than the EMA 20 or above it, right? So we want that output. We want A greater than B. So since we reversed the short outputs, we're also going to reverse the long outputs as well, like so, right? So there we go. So now we can see, actually, let me turn the long outputs off first. There we go, yeah. So now we can see, right, the high is just a fraction above the EMA 20, and we're getting a short output there. So there we go. So we know that's correct. So now let's turn the long output back on, right? And of course, you know, when we're in a downtrend, the low of the bar is always going to be below the EMA 20. So we're always going to get a long output. But again, remember that doesn't matter that we're getting a long output, because, right, our AND node with the trend filtering, right, is going to strip out that long output there. So if I connect this in, there we go. There is our signal. And yeah, it just so happens, there we go. There's a long signal. So, okay, so here we go. So here's an example of what I'm looking for here. So we're looking for the wick to be touching the EMA 20. But here we can see this bar doesn't have a wick, right? So in this case, so the high of the bar is above the EMA, but also the open of the bar, right? So if you want just the wick, so, you know, if we're looking at this bar, for example, right? If you want only the wick to be touching your moving average, well, the high is above it, but the open of the bar needs to be below the EMA, right? So here the open of the bar equals the high of the bar, but more importantly, the open of the bar is above the EMA, right? So we want to make sure that the open of the bar is below it. So let's grab another comparison solver. Connect that up. So now we're going to compare the open price of the bar to the EMA 20. And so that's how we can isolate that only the wick of these Renko bars is touching the EMA. So, right? So it's simply just a matter of, defining what is the wick of a bar. All right, so for input A, these are all going to be the open price there. And then input B will be our EMA 20. Yeah, we can just use the default outputs here, right? So this case we want for a short output, right, for a short signal, we want the open to be less than the EMA, right? So we want A less than B, right? A below B. And so here we can see that the open is actually above the EMA, and there's no short output, right? There's a long output, but there's no short output. So when I connect that in, there we go. That stripped out that signal right there. So that removed our signal that was right there. Let's see what else we got here. All right. So that does it for the BloodHound signals. Yep, that's all of it. So, all right. So we got rule 1, 2, and 3 in place.